further to my south. But when you have that and an acute tornado risk in one of the biggest, most densely populated areas of the country at night, not a great recipe for travel. The good news, though, it's Sunday, commute not quite as bad as it.
Stop it right here! Stop right here! We gotta back up! Back it up! Back it up! Oh! Roof's going! Roof's gone! Right now! Iowa! Hurricane Idala making landfall right now as a Category 3 storm, high intensity Cat 3. The roof of this building was just ripped off right behind me. As you can see, power lines down right now as it makes landfall. Here we go, guys. Here it comes.
And coming at you live from the Orlando studio here in the MyRadar HQ. Of course, we are tracking Hurricane Helene, which is set to make landfall as a major hurricane on Thursday. Of course, today's date is September 25th. It is a Wednesday, and we are gearing up for a super active next couple of days of weather. We have got team coverage. I told you things were going to ramp up across our coverage, and we have got meteorologists, tropical weather experts, storm chasers, everybody standing by. You can see Jordan, David, Erica all standing by. We've got Capucci on the phone as well, but we're going to get to Dr. David Ruglicki first. He's got to get going here shortly for a meeting, and then he's going to rejoin us into the second half of the stream. So, David, we are talking about a storm right now that seems to be undergoing intensification here. Of course, it is a Category 1 hurricane as it stands right now in the Gulf of Mexico, forecast to become a Cat 2 here in just a couple of hours. What are you seeing on satellite radar, and what are your expectations here in the next 12 hours?
Sure. So what we're seeing here on satellite imagery, and this is something Jordan actually talked about on Twitter, is that there was a dry slot on the southern side that was wrapping around on the northern side of Helene. Well, that appears to be closing off if we look at some radar imagery, which I don't have pulled up right now. But it looks like it is finally closing off an eye. And what that means is that once the eye is closed off with the precipitation, you're going to get, you're going to block that dry air from getting into the core, and you should see some probably rapid intensification coming here really shortly. So this is your visible imagery. If we jump to the water vapor imagery, so the water vapor is really nice to show you there's this really moist pocket that Helene finds itself in right now. So the white are your basically your high clouds, and your red are high clouds. Green and blue are moist upper and lower mid-level. So even though there is a dry spot, it's still moist there. And like, this still is a tropical cyclone, but it certainly looks like we're finally going to be seeing some rapid intensification as this storm starts pulling itself together.
All right, so David, that'll we'll come back to you after your meeting here. We're going to keep going around the horn here. I see folks on TikTok saying that there's no sound, so Jack, we can get that fixed here. Again, we're streaming to you live across all of our social media platforms. But next, we're going to toss it to a gentleman that is really putting in the miles. That being meteorologist Matthew Capucci. He's joining us via the phone. I believe Matthew, you said that you are in a Dollar General. Where exactly are you? And what are your plans here as we get into tomorrow?
Yeah, so anyone tuning to the app right now knows that earlier on I was doing lots of videos in the MyRadar app. We had ones for the inland impacts from Helene. We had one for the coastal impacts in Florida. We have a couple others coming on what folks can expect. But right now I'm actually making my way from the Orlando studios up in the direction of Perry, Florida. We're not sure exactly where landfall will be quite yet. We anticipate the Big Bend. That said, there might be a shift a little bit to the east, a little bit to the west. So I think Perry, Florida is a good place for me to reposition right now and just kind of wait it out. I know Taylor County has been trying to evacuate everybody. They're not opening shelters in Taylor County. They want everybody out farther inland. A few hotels open at least tonight per night. Well, that's unclear open, but I would say right now.
He's breaking up really bad.
And one of the issues with the Big Bend, there's not much of a road network there. The other challenging factor, too, is that it's a flat area and very low lying with a very gradually sloping topography. And so it's easy for a surge to come in and be a big issue, penetrate really far inland, and especially east of the center where we're forecasting.
Oh, I think we might have just lost him. Jack, do you hear him? Because I don't hear him anymore. Okay. All right. So we'll move on from Capucci. Let's, Jack, if you want to take the app here on the main screen here. I think David's screen share is still up. We'll get back to Capucci, but obviously, as he was alluding to, he's up in that Big Bend area of Florida, so right up here, where cell service even last year during Idalia was super duper spotty. And somebody that was there on the ground chasing Hurricane Idalia is who I'm going to bring in next. That, of course, is storm chaser Jordan Hall, who is joining us. Jordan, remind me again where you are.
I'm currently standing in Carabel, Florida.
Okay, Carabel, Florida. So, Jordan, it looks like you've got some boarded up business behind you there. Walk us through what it looks like on the ground for you.
Yep, so we're right here on the Gulf side of Florida, just east of Apalachicola. And here you can see behind me, we have all these gas stations are starting to become boarded up. I did talk to the gas station owner across the street, and he said they're going to try to keep it open as long as possible. But obviously, with the new updated storm surge map up to 18 feet potentially, they're going to have to shut it down sooner than later, probably tomorrow morning.
So you're right there, kind of in the thick of it here, where you are. I'm looking at the. Up the cone here. Sorry, Jordan, the app crashed on me. There we go. That's on my that's all my fault here. So you're right there in the center of the cone there. This is a track that seems to be wobbling just a little bit back and forth here. What are your plans? Obviously, the storm surge threat is pretty significant here, 10 to 15 feet where you are. What are your plans?
So my plans are to kind of just watch how the storm's going to interact when it gets into the Gulf, and if it's going to wobble east or west, and kind of just line it up. I'm going to try to get into the northeast quadrant of the storm where the most intense winds are, but I do believe, as we've all seen, the storm's going to be coming in at a very high rate of speed, over 20 miles an hour. So you're going to see those winds really pushing way up north. I believe Atlanta's under a tropical storm watch too, if I remember right.
Yes, I mean those watches and warnings extend pretty much for almost the entire state of Florida northward as well. Jordan, this is a part of the world here that has now seen that is staring down the barrel of a second major landfall. Of course, last year was Idalia. This track a little different though. Last year with Idalia, that was closer to the Cedar Key area here near, off of to the southwest of Gainesville. But this represents a bit of a troubling track here from the National Hurricane Center. Can you speak to why and tell folks what it's like on the ground where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Idalia, it was more in that bend, and that bend, if you've never been there, it's not very populated. very thick forested area, and it's also bayou, so it can flood in behind you as well. Whereas out here, it's more populated. You have these barrier islands, and also right in the middle of that cone, you have places like Tallahassee that's going to get a lot of these hurricane force winds potentially if it does continue to go up there. And that's when we're going to start seeing some of that storm surge as well. And this area has been pretty battered by previous hurricanes too, and never really recovered. So some of these structures here are still damaged from previous storms, which is only going to create more debris and loose items to fly through the air.
Now, Jordan, of course, you are no stranger to chasing severe and significant weather. With storm surge as significant as what is expected there, and Jack, if you want to take my screen here, I'll bring the storm surge forecast up here. It's so now up to 12 to 18 feet of storm surge. So where Jordan is right there in Carabel, it's between 6 to 12 feet. I mean, Jordan doesn't seem like a big jump there, maybe to folks that are watching here, but that's a significant amount of water. That purple color there, 12 to 18 feet of water. That's almost a doubling of what the forecast was previously. I mean, if the water starts coming up on you fast there, what's your plan? Of course, landfall looks to occur now a little later into the evening, I should say, tomorrow. What are your plans in order to safely document this storm?
So my plans was to get here early, look at the roads and just map it all out, because you don't want to get caught off guard here, especially with this flood prone area. And to give you an idea of 12 to 18 feet of storm surge, I'm about 6 feet tall. And if we were to see 10, 12, even more feet of storm surge, it would be almost up to those cameras on this gas station. And people don't really, it's really hard to really understand it until you see it. And if you even start getting just 2 to 3 feet of storm surge in this area, you're not going to be able to drive and get out of here. And getting out of here, there's only 2 roads out of here to get you north towards Tallahassee. So it's very important to evacuate if you're asked to evacuate, and listen, because the second the storm hits, it might be too late to get out of here.
Jordan, thank you so much for that update. You have some time to hang with us here?
Yeah, I can hang. I was going to mute for a minute.
Awesome. Let's do that. So just to bring it back to the top here before we bring in Erica, what's going on, folks? My name is meteorologist Mike Linden. Again, I'm coming at you from the MyRadar studio here in Orlando, Florida. It is Wednesday, September 25th, right around 3:30 in the afternoon. Of course, we are tracking Hurricane Helene, and I've got it pulled up on the app here. As it stands right now, Helene is a Category 1 hurricane with winds at 80 miles per hour. It is forecast to rapidly intensify, and what we mean by that is effectively the storm undergoing a deepening and a strengthening under a very quick amount of time. The expectation is that we'll have a Category 2, if not by later tonight, then potentially much sooner than that. It's heading into a part of the world right now, that being the Gulf of Mexico, that has just been the big difference maker for tropical cyclone development. And in the MyRadar app, I've got the temperature layer turned on here, and you can see the water-based temperatures, 87 degrees all along the western coastline of Florida, pretty much all the way toward the landfall area. So that represents a lot of storm fuel. There's also not a lot of wind shear, of course, that being winds that differ with height and speed that typically would work against hurricane development. So as it stands, Helene is set to intensify and really push the upper bound limits of what's possible with this storm. One other thing I'd like to mention before we bring in Erica as well is look at the sheer size of this storm. It might be hard to see here on radar given that I don't have a measurement tool for you here, but Helene's wind field, that being all the way from this western band all the way eastward to where the feeder bands are kind of coming up through Cuba right now, that's about 400 miles. This would represent one of the larger storms that we've seen in quite a long time. I mean, shoot, even the eye of the storm is gigantic, right? So it's very important to understand that threats are going to extend well beyond the center of the storm, that being the eye. We're here in Orlando. We are under a tropical storm warning. Right at the bottom of your screen there, I don't think you can see it on TikTok, but you can see it on every other social media platform we're streaming to, and of course in the app as well. You can see a running count of all of the active warnings. There are a lot of them, both hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings that extend as far north as Atlanta, Georgia. So this storm is a very large one. The wind field is, of course, very potent. And the expectation is that into tomorrow, this is right around, you can see up here near landfall. This says the 27th, but that's in UTC time. We're expecting a landfall, and Erica's going to show you that here momentarily. Now into tomorrow evening, that being Thursday, between about 8 and maybe 10 p.m. It continues to get a little bit later in the day. But one thing that we are seeing here with Helene is that it is intensifying. It's becoming larger, more well organized. This is going to look like a fairly scary storm as we get into tomorrow morning. Of course, this is just after Francine came through Florida. But then, of course, when you go back just 1 year to 2023, Hurricane Idalia making landfall in a similar area of Florida, although now Helene's track expected to be a little bit farther to the west. Also, one thing to understand when we're looking at the cone, that center line does not represent where the storm is going. It represents about the approximate middle of the cone being the cone of probability, meaning anywhere within it may see a landfall. So that is from where Jordan is here near Carabel, all west to Mexico Beach, of course, that being where Hurricane Michael made landfall in 2018, and as far east as you can see near Perry here, that's where meteorologist Matthew Capucci is. I also want to mention, if you are watching us on TikTok, I see a bunch of you in here. Thank you so much for watching us. We hit, I think it was 74,000 followers. Yeah, we hit 74,000 yesterday. If you'd be so kind as to follow us here on TikTok, that way you always know whenever we go live, or of course, whenever we drop a new TikTok. We will be streaming live tomorrow on TikTok, on across all of our social media platforms, pretty much the entire day tomorrow. So stick with us and we will give you the information as it comes into us. Again, we really appreciate all of the support. Tap on the screen, let us know that you're enjoying the screen too. And hey, share the screen with your friends and family. That way they can get in the loop as well. I'm also going to try my best. I see the questions coming in from YouTube as well as on Facebook, on X, and on TikTok. I'm going to take a moment to answer some questions here momentarily. But what I'm going to do now is bring in meteorologist Erica Lopez. Erica has been, of course, following along with this storm, providing coverage to both the MyRadar social media platforms and MyRadar en Español. Erica, this is expected to be quite an interesting storm, one that we were paying attention to at its inception. But now with rapid intensification set to begin into the Gulf of Mexico, I mean, I've seen the graphics that you have prepared off to the side here. This looks to be one of the more significant storms that we've seen so far this season.
Yeah, and you were talking about how large this storm is. I don't know if we can put up our satellite imagery that we have on the app, but I think that really paints a clear picture of what Helene is looking like as it makes its way across the Gulf. And it's still miles away from where it's supposed to make landfall. So it still has time to intensify. We're expecting it to intensify to a major hurricane. And I'm watching the chat as well. I see a lot of you are concerned for maybe even parts that are not going to see the landfall, but where you're going to see the impact. So on your screen, what you're seeing, and I want to show you, this is our wind threat. Now, I have covered storms in Jacksonville. I'm seeing a lot of questions about Jacksonville. One of the things that really does concern me about Jacksonville is, although our rainfall forecast here, and let me show you this on the screen, our rainfall forecast doesn't seem too significant. But if you've been in Jacksonville over the past 2 weeks, it's been raining pretty much nonstop over the last several weeks. And so one of my primary concerns, especially across not just Jacksonville, but along that I-95 corridor all the way down to basically Daytona Beach, is the flooding impacts. So the ground is already saturated. You're way above normal for this time of year in terms of rainfall. So I think the impacts, although it's not going to be as much rain as where the landfall is going to occur, we may see even more down.
Oh, Jack, did we lose Erica?
You can see that our winds are still at about 70, or you're seeing our winds, or tropical storm force winds from Jacksonville, even into Orlando and down into parts of South Florida. So although you're not going to get the bulk of the storm just because our grounds are already saturated for most of Northeast Florida and parts of Southeast Georgia, that's where I think we're going to see some of the biggest impacts. Of course, watching where the landfall is going to be here over the next several hours, winds greater than 110 miles per hour, of course, near where the landfall is going to occur. And take a look at those hurricane force winds that also extend well inland into southern parts of Georgia and even parts of Alabama, where you're going to see some pretty significant winds. So I think although we are focusing in on where the landfall is, we're going to see impacts well inland, and pretty much the entire state of Florida is going to see some sort of impact from Hurricane Helene. Of course, storm surge, we were talking about that earlier. That's one of the primary threats here, and that's really one of the potential catastrophic threats that we could see as we head into tomorrow. And of course, these impacts starting as early as tomorrow. You can see stretching all the way down Florida's west coast here. So something to keep in mind, Southwest Florida and even parts of Northeast Florida and even parts of Jacksonville, you're also going to see storm surge. But overall, I think one of the concerns as well is the rainfall potential, and you're seeing this excessive rainfall outlook. So what this tells us, it's its own sort of category in terms of risk for rainfall. There are 4 tiers, and you're seeing that red zone, that is the level 3 out of 4, and then we have that high risk of excessive rainfall. They just updated this just a couple of minutes ago, and you're seeing that kind of magenta color. That's a high risk of excessive rainfall for tomorrow, Thursday, September 26th. That's where we're expecting the landfall, and even parts of Georgia where you're seeing rain today, and it'll be pretty much nonstop. This is from a separate system, but then as Helene comes closer to making landfall, the rain will start to increase. So I think across Georgia, be prepared for those impactful rains that are going to come because of Hurricane Helene. And I showed you this graphic earlier. It's just the rainfall totals, mostly focusing in on Florida's east coast, but you can see up to 10 to 15 plus inches of rainfall is possible just from this storm alone. So some of those impactful rains. Now, I want to walk you through a little bit of some models that we have here on screen. This one is the HRS. So this is a little bit more accurate on where our landfall is going to be. You're probably seeing on social media all different types of meteorologists sharing all sorts of different weather models. Now, the track, we are certain that it's going to make landfall across Florida's Big Bend region. But what I'm showing you here is how this the rains will start to come as early as tonight. You're seeing most of the heavy rainfall. Some of you are already feeling the impacts from the outer bands of Hurricane Helene, and this will be pretty much nonstop until we get into Friday overnight. And you can see the landfall. The timing could be anywhere after 7 and even anywhere before 10 p.m. tomorrow Eastern time. So something to keep in mind. And of course, this is just one model run. We're expecting all the rain to also head into parts of Georgia. And this is another one that I want to show you. It looks a little bit better on your screen. It looks a little bit more defined as of the hurricane as it intensifies. But this is one that we're a little not so, I guess, agreeing on where this landfall is going to be. The timing, I think, will still be around the same time, but you can see a lot of rainfall still coming from parts of Florida, and then eventually we're going to get that landfall sometime tomorrow. So we are sure that this is going to make landfall across Florida's Big Bend region. We are sure that they're going to see some of the most impacts from Hurricane Helene, but pretty much all the state of Florida. We're here, we're keeping you up to date on what's going on, but really my primary concern will be flooding pretty much anywhere those rains, and again, prepare for power outages here. Today, pretty much is the last day to get prepared for this storm, so start to wrap up those preparations as we're expecting landfall tomorrow afternoon.
Erica, that was a great breakdown there, and it looks like we might have.
I'm ready.
What timing there? I think we just lost Erica, Jack. That being said, all of those points were very, very apt. I mean, we're looking at a storm here that again is going to be hitting a part of the world that hasn't had necessarily a direct landfall in a bit. That being said, you're running out of time, as Erica alluded to get prepared. I've got Jordan on the Zoom call. I know Matthew Capucci is back in. I'll bring them in here momentarily. I just want to remind folks that are watching on social media and, of course, in the app that we are streaming live across all of our social media platforms. And if you're wondering the app that we're using, Jack, I've got it pulled up right here. That satellite view right over the top of my head, in addition to the radar view here that Jack's going to pull up here in just a moment here. That is, of course, boom. That is the MyRadar app. You can see the name on my shirt. It is completely free to download on iOS, Android, as well as on the Amazon platforms, on a Windows PC as I'm using here, and coming soon to Apple TV as well. I've seen the prototype, or I guess the beta, I should say, of that app, and it is very, very cool. Of course, the app is completely free to download. That way you can always track all of the active weather that is heading your way. You can see our live coverage as you're seeing today, and of course, get all of our hyper-local video alerts that our video team will send out if severe significant weather is headed your way. If you're watching on TikTok, I see a lot of you in the chat that are watching on TikTok. We'd really appreciate it if you'd follow us on TikTok. It is completely free to do as well, and help us reach our goal of, hey, if we can hit 75,000 followers here live, that would be pretty awesome. Tap on the screen as well. Let us know that you're showing your support that way. I see a lot of folks here that are sending us gifts. The Pixie Chick, welcome back. I think you were here yesterday. Jordan, Benny, Kate, US George, thank you so much for all of the gifts. Really, really appreciate your support as always. We're going to take some time here to answer any of your questions that are coming in. I see some as well on YouTube. Folks are talking about the Jaguars being washed away. Erica, it looks like folks in Duval County are not too pleased with the performance of the local football team. But before we get to some of the questions, while we have them, let's bring meteorologist Matthew Capucci back in. Capucci, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, fantastic. I hear you. So I know that you're up in a part of Florida, Capucci, that it doesn't have the greatest of cell service. Remind folks that are watching where you are again.
Most definitely. So right now I am near, actually just northwest of Orlando in the direction of Ocala. I'm heading up towards Perry in the Big Bend. You know, we're pretty confident this thing will make landfall in the Big Bend probably sometime, like Erica said, tomorrow evening. The biggest wild card at this point is whether or not it fends off the dry air that's been trying to infiltrate it. But as Dr. Riglicki mentioned, you know, it's managing to intensify even with that dry air. And I think in the next 6 to 12 hours, it'll finally just get rid of that dry air and probably kind of be off to the races. Couple concerns.
Capucci, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, we have record oceanic heat content in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. That means the oceans are red hot. We got water temperatures like 86 to 89 degrees Fahrenheit, a ton of fuel in those warm waters for a hurricane to tap into. And the other concern, too, we have spreading in the upper atmosphere, divergence aloft, which basically means that you're going to suck air upwards and resultantly intensify the storm even more. There's like a vacuum, if you will, in the upper atmosphere, pulling air upwards, and that just makes it way easier for Helene to intensify. So I don't see many limiting factors other than potentially that dry air in the short term. Once we get to probably 3, 4 in the morning tonight, I think there's not going to be much holding Helene back until landfall, and we could very realistically see a high-end Category 3 to a Category 4 landfall.
So, Capucci, I've got some folks asking on TikTok here, asking about the chance of it getting to potentially even as strong as a Category 5. Going off of what you just said, that there's not going to be very many limiting factors overnight into tomorrow, are you seeing anything that suggests to you, given the atmospheric conditions and what the forecast could lead to, are you seeing anything really putting restrictions on the top end ability of Helene here?
Well, there could be a couple things. There could be a subtle uptick in shear, so disruptive changing winds with height, once the thing gets very close to landfall. I don't think that would be enough to weaken it, but I do think that would be enough to prevent it from getting to a Category 5. For Category 5, you need everything to be absolutely perfect, and I mean perfect in the worst of ways.
Right.
And I don't really think we have that right now. The fact that there is some dry air kind of lurking nearby is an indicator that the environment isn't perfect, but it's getting pretty close. The fact that we were able to pinch off a core is problematic. And one thing to note, too, you know, hurricanes are big systems, but they all come down to their eye and the core. That's like the chimney, if you will, of a hurricane. The purpose of a hurricane is to distribute heat both horizontally, so from the equator up towards the poles, but also vertically to the upper atmosphere. And that's why the hurricane is like a heat engine with a chimney in the middle. And in order for a hurricane to organize, you need to get that chimney sort of going. You need to have that shaft where the warm air can go upwards. And the fact that we're already pinching off a core shows that we have that, and now the rest of the storm can kind of build around it. One other piece of information too, we know that there's a swirl in the middle. We know that there's kind of this nascent core. We saw on radar from Cancun that the eye wall, that ring of wind surrounding the eye, or the core, has sort of pinched off. But now we're seeing what are called convective bursts, or bursts of thunderstorm activity over it. And that's going to help lift air up and away from the core and allow the storm to intensify even more, while also releasing latent heat. Every time you have a thunderstorm, it releases heat to the atmosphere. That allows for more upward motion, and you're going to get, a deeper, more intense storm. So all these factors to me say we're looking at a high-end Category 3 to at least a low-end Category 4 when this thing makes landfall. My guess, 135-mile-per-hour storm.
Capucci, some more folks asking on YouTube and asking on TikTok. In fact, I just saw somebody here that said, oh, good thing it's going to miss Orlando. It's not coming to me. Now, that may be true that landfall and that the center of the storm is not coming over you in Orlando, but you touched on it as well. This is a very, very big storm. Impacts are going to be felt far away from the eye. Walk us through what folks, I mean, even us here in Orlando, where I am seated right now talking to you, what could folks in Orlando and up the spine of the state see that are likely to remain east of the hurricane's eye?
Yeah, that's a really great point. You mentioned the size of that wind field. This is a really big system. In fact, it's in the top 10% for size for systems at this latitude. In other words, if you have a hurricane in Florida, this is like the top 10% of how big a hurricane in Florida could get. And so I think it's important for folks to know that not all parts of the hurricane are the same. Right now, we're getting sporadic downpours across Orlando. I've driven through a few. We're getting them up and down the entire Sunshine State. Nothing atypical. But by tomorrow, we'll start seeing those spiral rain bands work north overnight to early tomorrow morning. And those are like the outer bands of the storm. There's not much wind in those. Once we head towards probably lunchtime, you'll start noticing the winds increasing markedly in the Tampa to Orlando corridor, right along, I-4, 408, those sorts of highways. And each time you get a band, the wind will get a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger. So we'll probably see gusts around 70, 75 miles per hour by supper time, maybe a little thereafter. In Tampa. Orlando, I could reasonably see gusts 60 to 70 miles per hour. I think from there and points northwards, that's where we'll see the real damaging to locally destructive gusts over 80 miles per hour. Ocala, I plan for winds 80 to maybe 85 miles per hour in the direction of Gainesville. Probably pretty strong winds to low-end hurricane force. But those strongest gusts, the extreme winds over 115 miles per hour commensurate with a major landfalling hurricane, will be relegated to both the coastline and the core of the storm in that eye wall. At the coast, we might see gusts over 120, 130 miles per hour. But I do think up towards Highway 89, Harry, over west towards maybe Tallahassee, if it gets that far west that the eye wall kind of backs in, we could see gusts over 100, 110 miles per hour. And there's a pretty good chance, actually, that with that area, we'll see the National Weather Service issue something called an extreme wind warning. And I want to tell folks at home briefly a little bit about that because they probably have never heard of that before. The extreme wind warning is issued only when Category 3 or greater landfalls are expected. The eye wall is moving ashore, so winds over 115. And the alert actually didn't exist until 2007. So back in 2004, when Hurricane Charlie made landfall in Florida I think it was August 13th that year, the National Weather Service in Melbourne actually issued tornado warnings around Orlando, not for tornadoes, but for the eye wall, because the winds were just so bad. And then that happened again with Katrina. They issued 19 of them. It happened with Dennis, Rita, and Wilma. And finally, the Weather Service said, hey, we need a special alert for hurricane eye walls. So if folks get a buzz on their phone saying extreme wind warning tomorrow, that means they're about to get imminent tornado-like wind speeds in the eye of a hurricane and need to seek shelter in an interior room that is not susceptible to flooding. That's a biggie here, Mike. Folks are dealing with tornadic winds or tornado strength winds. They're dealing with flooding. A lot of hazards to worry about.
So for folks that are watching, of course, you can see the storm here on radar. Of course, I'm looking at it on MyRadar. Jack, can we pull up the iPad here I've got next to me? I'm looking at it on satellite. Again, this is a brand new feature in the MyRadar app that gives you effectively, it's called Geocolor satellite. And this is giving you effectively what the storm looks like from space. I mean, it is a super cool feature to be able to get a look at this storm. If you're looking right at the center of the storm, of course, you can see that central convection, that counterclockwise motion. But if you look kind of toward the where the map label says Gulf of Mexico there on the, upper left-hand side, you can see that divergence that Capucci is talking about, how things are spreading out at the surface. Effectively, this storm is waking up in the morning, getting a nice big stretch. I mean, it is a very, very healthy storm at this moment in time. And one also thing I should mention that, of course, if you download the MyRadar app and you have notifications turned on, then if there is severe significant weather coming to you, for example, if you are here in the path of the storm up near the Big Bend, then what we will do is send you a video that is local to your area, and it will feature either Capucci or Erica or somebody from our team breaking down the threats that are coming to you. And Capucci, you still with me here? Oh, did we lose Capucci?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, I hear him. Okay, no worries. So Capucci, before he left the studio, shot a video on the extreme wind warning. So effectively, again, for folks that live in the path of the storm, make sure you have the app downloaded and make sure that you have notifications turned on, because if that moment comes, you're probably going to want somebody to help break things down, to help you understand what is coming your way. And Capucci has got you covered. Capucci,
let me know when you're ready for me.
Before we let you go, and we're going to send it over to Jordan, or can we, Jack, can we bring Jordan and Capucci in at the same time? Perfect. Yeah, let's bring them both in. Of course, both these guys are going to be chasing the storm on the ground. And for folks that are watching here in the chat, this is your opportunity to ask some veteran storm chasers as to what it will be like to chase this very, very strong hurricane here. So I'll be keeping an eye on the chat here. If you guys get your questions in, we'll try our best to answer them. Jordan, remind the folks where it is that you are coming to us from.
Yeah, I'm in Carabel, Florida, and we were, as Capucci and you were just talking about that divergence aloft and the big storm. Here in Carabel, you can actually see this photo of an old hurricane that came up through here, and it looks so similar to what Helene looks like right now, with the nice spread look coming up and over. But something else I really wanted to point out is this entire block is boarded up, and you can see sandbags being placed. As I walk down the street, you can see all the boarded up windows and businesses with sandbags, as just across the street here is the water. This is where the water's at. So if we do get storm surge, these will be the first businesses impacted here in Carabel.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly prepared there. Capucci, you said that you're near Ocala. You're on your way to like where Jordan is. Your plan, you said that you were going to be near Perry on the eastern side of the cone.
Yeah, they have a good bunch of hotels there, and since I'm coming up from Orlando, I figured I would play there, and then, I'm sure Jordan and I will probably wind up in the same place tomorrow, or someplace very similar, depending on where that eye winds up going. He's
now, I know
from Oklahoma. I'm coming in from the east. Also,
right.
Jordan, I have a bone to pick with you. I have always wanted to see a water spout. What the hell?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
For those of you that don't know what's going on here, Jordan, of course, got to Florida yesterday and was streaming live on TikTok. He has the camera on him, and then he is looking out toward the water and goes, "Oh my God, there's a water spout!" Flips his camera around and sees it happening live. We shared that on our social media, so be sure to check that out. That was really, really awesome. Now, both of you guys, I think, are in the same boat here, where I see you guys up on social media posting on X and Instagram and whatnot. Super late at night, looking at the latest models to come in here. For folks that are watching and listening here, what are you guys seeing in terms of the trend, given that you are going to be there on the ground dealing with the direct impacts of Hurricane Helene? What are you seeing trending on the models? Of course, for folks, again, that you hear this word a lot, weather models, effectively it is looking at a bunch of different outcomes, changing variables in teeny little ways. There's some based in other countries, some based in the United States. They're these supercomputers that really break down weather possibilities. You've got the GFS, the European, the NAM, Canadian, ICON, there are a million of them. But Jordan, Capucci, what are you guys seeing on the models that are maybe making you perk up a little bit?
You go ahead first, Capucci.
Yeah, on my end, there are a couple things that are giving me cause for concern, and I'm sure that Jordan will kind of echo these.
I can pull them up too, like Capucci, if you call it out. I can pull it up for you.
Well, I was going to say a couple of like the limiting factors that we thought would be there, or the models hinted might be there, are not really there. Yesterday, for example, when we were waiting for a center to form, it looked like there's a chance the nascent center would pass over the Yucatan Peninsula. That didn't happen. And so the models indicated that if it did happen, the storm would trend weaker. If it didn't happen, the storm would stay over the open waters, take advantage of all that heat, and wind up being stronger. The latter is what happened. So now we're expecting a higher end landfall given that. And the models made that abundantly clear yesterday. Another thing, too, there's one model called the HAFS-B. It's a hurricane-specific model. And it did a pretty good job of capturing the dry air intrusion, that little wedge of dry air that was sneaking into our storm today, sneaking into Helene, and kind of tempering the short-term intensification, preventing faster strengthening. But that same model that also said, hey, there's some dry air in place, it also indicates the storm will likely be a high-end Cat 3 to perhaps a Category 4. So even with that dry air there, the off-ramp that we had hoped would take this to be a weaker storm isn't really a thing. And the model says, hey, even with this limiting factor, Jordan, you've been doing this a hell of a long time. You've been through a cajillion hurricanes. Ultimately, what are you about?
I missed this question. He cut out pretty bad.
Yeah, he cut out the end.
I think what he was getting at was I've been through a few hurricanes and kind of what am I expecting? And I'm on the same page as Capucci here. The models initially had shown it going over the Yucatan, and clearly that's not the case. It kind of just sideswiped it. That main center circulation missed it, which will help it keep that center really tight and keep it from like blowing open with that dry air, because land interaction really messes with those center of circulation. So with the HAFS-B model that Capucci was talking about, it did show, it was one of the few models that actually did show some of that dry air getting in there. And it still showed it bombing out with the record temperatures in the Gulf. And I think that's something we just got to pay a lot of attention to. Is it's better to be over prepared than under prepared, and definitely take all of these evacuation notices and all of these notices for preparation seriously, because this is one of those storms with the heat index in the water that you really don't want to mess with. It isn't anything similar to like a Debbie or any of the last couple that we've dealt with. The floodgates are kind of opened with the realm of possibilities with this one. So that's something we really got to keep in consideration.
I've got the HAFS-B pulled up here from our good friends at Tropical Tidbits, tropicaltidbits.com, a free website. In the same way how MyRadar is free, Tropical Tidbits is free. It's got to be one of the better meteorological model websites out there. Big shout out to Dr. Levi Cowan. So as Jordan and Capucci are touching on here, the HAFS-B model did a pretty good job at effectively showing how the center of the storm kind of missed hitting Cancun. I know that was a very distinct possibility in the forecast from the National Hurricane Center that you might see a landfall in Cancun. That did not happen. In fact, there were airplanes taking off today from the Cancun International Airport. But Capucci, can you still hear us? Is he still here? Oh, I think we might have lost him. Jordan, you still there too?
Oh,
I see you.
He's
Okay,
there. He's there.
Yeah, I hear you, Capucci. So I'm looking at the HAFS-B here, and we see the central pressure on this particular model run go from 970 to 953 to 944, all the way to 930 millibars on pretty much arriving there in the Big Bend. Can you speak to, Capucci, how models are trying to grab hold of rapid intensification? I mean, that seems to be, particularly here in the Gulf of Mexico, it seems like we talk about it every time as being a possibility. And it seems like here lately, since going back to, 2020 even, that's if not even before that, that it seems like almost every storm that's getting caught here in the Gulf of Mexico under some way, shape, or form is undergoing rapid intensification. And it seems like Helene is going to be yet another one to make the list.
Yeah, and when we talk about air pressure, the air pressure is actually the weight of any of the air over a given place. And so when we say that the air pressure is dropping, that means there's less air over you. There's literally like less air on top of you. And that missing air is what causes the vacuum effect that drives the strong inward winds that makes a hurricane. So the more air that's missing from the middle, the lower the pressure, the stronger the inward winds. And in this case, Mike, when you give out numbers like 930, that's really impressive, because normally we're supposed to be around like 1,015 of what are called millibars. So just units for the folks at home. But that means we're missing about 7-8% of the atmosphere's ambient mass. And so since 8% of the air is missing, the whole rest of the atmosphere is pushing inward and trying to push air into the middle of the storm. And that's what makes these strong winds. And so a pressure of 930 to me says, maybe a category 4, which is pretty concerning. But one other thing you touched on, Mike, that rapid intensification, we had the storm, we had the recent one, Francine in Louisiana, strengthened a little bit at the last minute, but it was kind of faltering for a little while. Debbie didn't do too much. Beryl, didn't rapidly intensify before hitting the U.S. And so we've been worried that in an environment like this, just as you said, rapid intensification could happen, and it likely will. So this won't be like the other hurricanes the U.S. got this year. This will not be like the other 3 that Jordan and I chased. You're not going to have sort of a faltering or a weakening before landfall. If anything, this thing will be strengthening up until the point it moves ashore. And one other thing that I think is really concerning, this storm will be moving inland at about 20 to 25 miles per hour, which is very swift for a hurricane. So not only does that mean the worst conditions, the storm surge and the extreme winds will arrive quickly, but that also means the hurricane will penetrate much farther inland before really meaningfully weakening, which is why I think this could be a very significant damaging wind event for like southern eastern Georgia, like Valdosta, Macon. You guys could see gusts of 75 to 85 miles per hour. There could be a few gusts over 90 miles per hour in southern Georgia. So ultimately, this is definitely something that will be memorable for them. And if the track shifts a little farther west, Atlanta proper could see gusts of 60 to 75 miles per hour. So even major metros, including Atlanta, which has Hartsfield-Jackson, the #1 airport in the not number one, but most popular. Not most popular, you know what I mean? Busiest.
A very busy one.
Although I do like the airport. Terminal D, by the way, for the folks at home, has really good fudge, and there are 3 TGI Fridays in the airport. But anyway, if a storm's going to be moving over there, you're going to have big travel headaches and cascading delays and cancellations.
Capucci, when I was on the way here,
Go
ahead, Jordan. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Something I wanted to touch on with what Capucci said too is this situation isn't like the last 2 that had come into this area where they're dying upon landfall. As he had said, they're going to be coming in quick, and it's going to be intensifying as well. And I do know I've seen a lot of people in Florida that are like, it's just like the last one. And that is where it's very important to really take it seriously.
This is a situation I'm seeing folks here in TikTok that are asking, a lot of folks asking about Orlando. We'll kind of double back and we'll talk about more central Florida. I saw one comment that really jumped out at me, Capucci and Jordan. Someone said, oh, you're talking about rapid intensification. You're talking about Michael all over again. Of course, Hurricane Michael 2018 makes landfall in Mexico City Beach as a Category 5 hurricane. The name is retired. Communities there still recovering years later. So let's break down effectively the difference, Capucci, if we can here, between Helene and its forecast versus what Michael was doing. Of course, both storms forecast, or Michael rather, was intensifying all the way up to the moment of landfall. Helene is forecast to do so, but they are inherently a little bit different. Why is that, Capucci?
Well, I think the #1 thing to remember is that even though Michael was a Category 5, it wasn't classified as a 5 until after the fact. It's very difficult to, in real time, classify something as a Category 5 because you have to have overwhelming evidence. And oftentimes that evidence comes in later on when the Hurricane Center does what are called reanalyses. So they go back and they look at all the available data, and they found that Michael was indeed a 5. I think one thing to note is there are actually a couple similarities. Both hurricanes kind of originated from the same area, and both were not hurricanes 3 days before they made landfall. And so, both underwent that rapid intensification. In fact, most of the biggest storms in the U.S. weren't even named 3 days beforehand. They were very weak. And so almost every time you're going to get a high-end storm, a Cat 4 or a Cat 5, it's because of something like rapid intensification that makes the storm uptick pretty quickly. In terms of differences, Michael formed in October. The overarching environment was a little bit different. This time, you're in September, you might have a little bit more moisture. Granted, Michael had a pristine environment. So off the top of my head, it's difficult to figure out what significant differences there are. I think that Michael probably had a slightly better inner structure first in terms of, having that core solidified. That said, I think people oftentimes go to sleep and expect something's going to be the same when they wake up in the morning. This might be one of those cases where folks go to sleep tonight, they're like, oh, hurricane, cool. And wake up the next day, they're like, oh, major hurricane, not cool.
Capucci, I just saw somebody in TikTok here that said, how is it different from Ian? They have PTSD from Hurricane Ian.
Yeah, so With regard to, okay, good. I'm unmuted. I wasn't sure if I muted myself. With regard to Ian, that was sort of a different thing in that the steering currents were different. What wound up moving Ian so far to the east or the right at the last minute was a trough or pocket of cold air, low pressure spin, counterclockwise spin that was present over the northern Gulf. And that basically scooped the thing east and it kind of swept it northeastwards. And it was almost like Ian was trying to hitch a ride. Whereas in this case, we have another system like that, but it's so far to the north and west that we're actually going to get this storm, Helene, to go almost due north as it makes landfall or slightly east of due north, then kind of whip back. And that's why we're expecting so much rain and wind across portions of the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. I think portions of, eastern Tennessee, Cumberland Plateau, towards the mountains of the Carolinas, even northeast Georgia could see winds, gusting upwards of 55 miles an hour, but also a ton of rainfall. So the inland impacts will almost be shunted farther west. So this will not be a thing for like DC, Baltimore, Philly, New York, like some East Coast hurricanes are. This thing is going into Florida, then almost taking a left.
Yeah, I've got the track pulled up here. Of course, crazy to see Atlanta under a tropical storm warning. I mean, that just is so far inland. And then, of course, as Capucci, you were just touching on, the storm expected to hook left here into Nashville and even into parts of western Kentucky, southern Indiana, and Illinois as we get into late this upcoming weekend, weakening, of course, to a tropical depression at that point. Just want to make mention for the folks that are here watching on TikTok, we just got this thing that happens every now and again that thinks that I'm showing you the MyRadar app. We are MyRadar on a verified account, and TikTok seems to think that we're reproducing content that doesn't belong to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the live on TikTok and then restart it. So for all of you that are here, yeah, of course, just popped up, appeal not approved. Make it make sense. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to kill the live stream here and then start it over again. So for the folks that are watching on TikTok, we'll be coming back here in just a moment. But Erica, I want to bring you. Oh, Jordan's got to get going. So, Jordan, is there anything else you wanted to share before we round things out with you?
No, I think we're covered all of it. And then if you're still live when I'm down the road a little bit and I find something, I'll hop in.
Great. All righty. That sounds good. All right. So, Jordan, thank you very much.
House on me.
Would you expect anything less from Capucci of all the restaurants? All right. We're starting up the TikTok stream here again, and I'm just going to re-rack it here from the top as we do so. What's going on, everyone? My name is meteorologist Mike Linden. I'm coming at you live from the MyRadar studio in Orlando, Florida. It is 4:12 Eastern Standard Time. Well, I guess 4:13 there on your screen. You can see we are coming at you live across all of our social media platforms and, of course, in the MyRadar app as well. That is the app that I'm using right here on Windows. Of course, you can download it for free on iOS, Android, Amazon, as well as here on Windows, coming soon to Apple TV as well. In a moment, we are going to be joined by meteorologist Erica Lopez, and then we also have tropical weather expert Dr. David Ruglicki that is going to be rejoining the stream here momentarily too. We've got meteorologist Matthew Capucci on the phone. Is he still there?
Yep. In the
All
flesh.
right. Great. Capucci is still there as well. So I'm going to give you guys just a rundown of what the storm looks like right now. We'll send it over to Erica. And then for the folks that are joining here in TikTok, I will try to answer as many of your questions as they come in. So, of course, as it stands right now, Hurricane Helene is right here just to the east of Cancun. It was looking likely that it could have made landfall in Mexico. It did not. And that, of course, means that it has remained east of land, meaning it is staying over water all the way until it's making landfall somewhere in Florida. It is a Category 1 hurricane as it stands right now with winds at 80 miles per hour. It is forecast to become a Category 2 hurricane later this evening, while continuing to rapidly intensify into a Category 3. That would mean a major hurricane. That's anything Cat 3 and above. It still remains to be seen as if it will intensify beyond a Category 3. In an earlier forecast video from Matthew Capucci, he talked about the potential for maybe reaching up into that Category 4 range. Going beyond that, we'll talk with Capucci on his thoughts as to if the storm could reach Category 5 in intensity. But needless to say, the storm is expected to make landfall tomorrow at about between about the 8 and 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time window, give or take an hour or so. This is a very large storm, so it's possible that we might see landfall even a little bit earlier as it's really hustling. Or again, given its sheer size, that could work against it as well. Kind of the wind field really being the large part of the storm, whereas the eye will be right there, of course, in the center of the storm. But that should occur tomorrow evening. We will be streaming live here in the MyRadar app and across all of our social media platforms as well. Looks like we've got all the people back from TikTok that we lost before. So I'm going to throw this up on screen. We are almost at 75,000 followers. If you can help us reach that goal, that would be incredibly awesome. Of course, click on the follow button. It is completely free to do so. And tap on the screen as well. Let us know that you're enjoying these live streams. We would like to continue to bring them to you guys as often as we can. And of course, share the live stream as well. I see all you folks as well that are watching on YouTube, Facebook, and on X as well. If you guys get your questions in over the course of the live, we're going to go for about another 45 minutes or so, as everybody pretty much on this live stream is getting prepared to be effectively doing a marathon tomorrow. Not to mention Capucci, who is on the phone, is going to be chasing this thing in person up in the Big Bend. Of course, the storm is forecast to make landfall somewhere here. You can see the cone that represents all of the possibilities. That center line does not show you where the storm is going. That's just the approximate middle of the cone. So the storm could go as far east as Perry. It could go as far west as Mexico Beach. But one thing's for certain, we're talking about major population centers here right in the path. That is the state, or the capital of Florida, Tallahassee. Beyond that, the storm is expected to continue to work its way northward into Atlanta. There are tropical storm warnings in effect in Atlanta, Georgia. That is so nuts to see that as far north as that. Jack, if you want to pull up the satellite view here. I've got it pulled up. I want to show folks what it looks like from space. It's a big honking storm. The wind field is going to be roughly 400 miles wide. So one thing that I need to make very, very clear, and I think folks often get caught up in the eye of the storm, that's just the center of it. Hurricanes are huge, and this particular one could be one of the largest we have seen in a long time in terms of its sheer size. 400 miles wide. So even for folks that are asking here on TikTok, that are asking about Orlando or Cape Canaveral, even on the eastern side of the state, the wind field is going to be very wide. So for us, even here in Orlando, especially so into tomorrow afternoon, you could certainly be feeling tropical storm force winds. And I know if you've lived in Florida, you know that storms pop up, they rain heavily, and they're done in 15, 20 minutes. This is not going to be like that. This is going to be a situation where once the rain starts, it should continue for a while, and those winds will be unrelenting as well. Okay, so that is kind of a rundown of what we are seeing right now. I want to bring in meteorologist Erica Lopez, who has been tracking things. And Erica, one thing that we really have not touched on a lot of is those impacts away from the eye. Much like what we saw with Idalia, the storm likely to stay on the western side of the state, but for the spine of it, the tornado threat is very real. On the eastern side of the storm is where you often find tornadic development. What does Florida's chances look like to see a tornado tomorrow?
Yeah, so I think that's something that we have yet to touch on. And there's just so many impacts with Hurricane Helene. So it's really important that if you're watching us, stay up to date on what's going on. Things change pretty quickly, and we're about a day away until this hurricane makes landfall in Florida, but the impacts are going to start as early as, even right now, we're seeing some rain, but as early as tonight into tomorrow morning. So what you're seeing on your screen is that tornado risk. Now, we do have a tornado risk today, but I really want to hone in on what's going to happen with that risk tomorrow, because the picture that the Storm Prediction Center is painting on your screen is something that I would say is pretty rare in terms of that tornado risk. We have a 10% chance of tornadoes in Southeast Georgia and parts of the Carolinas. And due to the part that because this storm is so big, Hurricane Helene is just massive in size, there's a little bit more of that low level shear especially across southeast Georgia, that's going to help these storms rotate. Now, these won't be like what you typically see in the plains. These are going to be quick spin up storms that have possibility of that seeing tornado warnings even into tomorrow. So these are going to be quick spin ups, but you could see several of them. And that's why the Storm Prediction Center is painting this picture with that 10% chance across southeast Georgia. Cannot rule out areas from Jacksonville, Daytona Beach, especially on the eastern side here of Florida. And so that's just also just one of those impacts that you have to watch, although it's making landfall and you're going to feel the wind, the rain, and even some of those across, Florida's west side, the storm surge. I want to draw your attention to the tornado risk that we will have heading into tomorrow. So remember, if you're under a tornado warning, you need to seek shelter. Tornado watch means the ingredients are favorable to see these sorts of conditions. So that's one of the important, I think, risks that we definitely have to watch tomorrow. And so again, most of Florida, if you're anywhere in Florida, I just want you to be aware of what's going on here over the next several hours. And like we were alluding to earlier, that wind risk as it makes landfall, we're still about a day, maybe a little bit more until Hurricane Helene makes landfall. So just so much to take in with this storm. And, we have everyone out in the field. We're going to have eyes on the storm. Today is just more so of informing you guys so you can prepare in advance and know what the impacts are going to be as we head into tomorrow, as we are, we're going to be here pretty much keeping you ahead of the storm throughout the day tomorrow.
Capucci, the tornado threat, Capucci, can you still hear me?
Yep.
So the tornado threat is another thing that I think folks tend to overlook when it comes to hurricanes. Can you break down why it is we could be looking at a fairly significant tornado threat? Erica's graphic there, and I saw folks on TikTok here that are saying, what's the green mean? That green represents a 2% chance for tornadoes. That extends as far south as Miami and extends as far north as North Carolina. The tornado threat tomorrow, very real on the eastern side of the storm. What are your expectations out of that? Of course, when you were chasing, what was it? Was it Debbie and Beryl? There were a ton of tornadoes through parts of Texas and as far north as Oklahoma. What are your expectations for Helene's tornado threat throughout the day tomorrow? We've got the graphic pulled up on screen here.
Yeah, so meteorology, there's an expression that says spin begets spin, meaning if you have a big spinning system, there tend to be smaller spinning systems. And in this case, obviously, Helene is spinning, it's a hurricane, but there's so much vorticity or spin in the air that the rain bands feeding into Helene can, in and of themselves, acquire enough spin to produce mesocyclones or columns of rotation, which oftentimes can produce tornadoes. Now, when you're in the solid hurricane's rain mass, we call it the central dense overcast, it's tough to get tornadoes in there because all the rain showers are kind of clumped together. But when you have more discrete thunderstorms or downpours that are more common in like the outer rain bands where there's lesser, blobbiness, more kind of individual storms, it's easier to rotate those. And with the overall shear, the changing winds with height around Helene, you're going to get some decent turning of the winds and produce some storms. And so I think in this case, North Florida is favored for a couple tornadoes tomorrow night. But then look, that risk extends especially into eastern Georgia. Savannah is under that 10% risk of tornadoes within 25 miles to a point. And we don't see those yellow shadings in the tornado outlook all that often when it comes to hurricanes. So this one could be a decent tornado producer. One other thing too, with the counterclockwise spin of Helene, we're going to swirl in so much warm, humid air from just offshore of the Carolinas towards the coast and inland. So we have a lot of juice to work with. And so that will kind of increase the risk of a couple tornadoes by making storms a little bit taller so they're able to feel those changing winds with height and rotate.
I want to bring tropical weather expert Dr. David Ruglicki back into the fold. David, thank you so much again for joining us. Can you touch on what Capucci was just alluding to? It is not often that we see that yellow shading on Erica's graphic there, that 10% tornado threat. The Storm Prediction Center issuing an enhanced risk for severe storms tomorrow. Now, I know that hurricanes are your expertise there, but of course, they can and have many, many times produced tornadoes. Can you speak to what kind of tornado threat we could be seeing tomorrow in that yellow shaded area there?
Sure. Historically, when hurricanes produce tornadoes, they're not the F4, F5 monsters that you'll see over the Great Plains for a variety of reasons. The thermodynamic conditions of a tropical cyclone are not the same as you would get from like a dry line or a cold front over the central United States. The one thing I wanted to point out here was, as Jack is moving this is just some historical context of intense category 3, 4, 5 major hurricanes making landfall. This is around Sopchoppy, which is south of Tallahassee. And we had 3 unnamed major hurricanes back in the 1800s, and then Michael, Idalia, and now we're looking for the 3rd one in 6 years. So we definitely have a landfalling cluster here on the way. But to go back to the tornado thing for a second, as Matt is correct, is that far away from the eye, your thermodynamic instability increases. So you're getting much more favorable situation in the rain bands for these tornadoes to develop. But they're generally going to be smaller, F0 for F1, not to downplay a tornado threat. For example, in the last storm back in August, I believe it was Debbie, I was in Wisconsin at the time. My wife texted me and said, hey, we're under a tornado warning. And sure enough, you look on the radar and there are 2 couplets that went 5 miles on either side of our house. So this is looking like it is a serious threat for the Florida peninsula coming up in the next day or so.
David, I often like to joke, every time you take vacation, we seem to deal with something like this. This may break that trend where you're in town and we're dealing with it. Although, Capucci, I saw a post, I think that you posted on X there. So silly, we have to say that. But on that social media platform where somebody saw you in the Orlando airport and went, "Oh no, you're here," which I thought was very funny. Capucci, I know you've got to get going here in a couple of minutes. Is there anything that you want to make mention to the folks that are watching? I can pull up any graphics for you here. Of course, we've got Erica and David here. The floor is yours, sir. And then I guess you can get going on your way to your final destination there as Helene makes landfall tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that's interesting, last time I was in this area, the Big Bend of Florida, was during Hurricane Idalia. And I encountered something called a mini swirl. And a lot of folks have never heard of that. A mini swirl is like a tornado scale vortex that behaves in a completely different way and forms in a different way, but they have them towards the innards of hurricanes. So like Dr. Glicky mentioned, we get tornadoes in the outer rain bands, but we also get these weird little spinny things towards the middle of hurricanes that we actually know very little about, and they tend to be in the eye wall, that ring of winds surrounding the eye. With regard to what a mini swirl is, following the passage of Hurricane Andrew back in 1992, Wakimoto and Fujita, so 2 very important, very preeminent physicists and meteorologists, flew over the damage to Homestead, Florida, south of Miami, and they saw swaths of really narrow localized destruction. And they found that you get these small vortices that might only produce winds of 40 or 50 miles per hour, but they whip about in the eye wall and add to the eye wall wind. So if you have a 40, 50 mile an hour vortex in a 120 mile an hour eye wall, suddenly you get a narrow swath of 170 mile per hour destruction. And when you have high-end intense hurricanes like this, it's easier to generate these mini swirls. They begin as like little curls of wind near the ground because the wind is so fast, curls around objects and whatnot, but they get stretched due to stronger winds aloft. And so you pinch off this vortex that might only be, 50 feet wide, but strong enough to do damage. And actually, both Jordan Hall and I have seen them before during Idalia. That was pretty impressive. I know he got a video of one, actually, which is pretty cool. But in any case, yeah, so that could be a concern tomorrow in the eye wall. That's why people get such, in addition to just the background extreme wind, they get changing winds, erratic winds. And that change of wind, that change of pressure that comes with changing winds is what does all the damage. We also have something called mesovortices, basically smaller whirls that are a couple miles wide that orbit the eye and basically, help flux angular momentum into the eye. There's so much wind in the eye wall and no wind in the eye that Mother Nature struggles to have a change that quick. So there are these little round eddies a couple miles wide that go around the outer edge of the eye, the inner eye wall, and they kind of bend and contort the eye wall such that it makes a weird change in wind right before you come to the eye. Like be in the eye wall, suddenly you're in the eye. vortex comes through, you get a big gust of wind again. It makes for really chaotic conditions. So the inner eyeball is just the nastiest part of the storm, and somebody in Big Bend.
We're starting to lose you a little bit, Capucci. But we'll leave you on your way. I know that you need to get to a place to kind of set up camp, so to speak, and then knowing you, sleep will be very limited tonight. So try to get some rest, Capucci. Find a Waffle House or something to give you some joy. Well, I guess you find joy in the in looking up at the clouds. So a lot of joy coming your way here over the next 24 hours. So thanks again for joining us, Capucci. We will talk to you tomorrow. Let's bring David back in here, Jack. I've got Shantona here on TikTok that says, MyRadar, this is what I use and love. It's always accurate. Shout out. Thank you so much. And for the folks that are watching us on TikTok, hey, if you haven't already, please follow us on TikTok. It is completely free to do so. You can see that we are so close to hitting 75,000 followers. Folks on other platforms, they would probably have no idea what I'm doing when I'm pointing like this. But on TikTok, I've got a little bar up there. So please follow us. We really appreciate it. Tap on the screen. Let us know that you're enjoying these live streams. We are going to be doing more of them as we go live more often across the year. And of course, we will be coming at you live pretty much the entire day tomorrow as the storm bears down on the Big Bend of Florida. David, this is a storm that right now is a Category 1 hurricane. It is forecast to be a Category 3 at landfall. Given everything that you've seen, looking at all the models and all of the things that we've discussed, a question that is often coming in here on social media. Do you think this is going beyond Cat 3?
I do. It's leaning in that direction because the Hurricane Center forecasts have gone conservative because I think it hasn't been as intensifying as fast as they thought it would be. Now, another thing you have to keep in mind is that the forecasts have actually slowed down. So what that means is that you're going to get some more time over water and you're going to get more intense. You have potential to get a more intense storm. The interesting thing about this is that if you look at the ensembles, the storm tracks that are farther east are actually more intense. And we think this has to do a little bit with the vertical wind shear. I'm going to
pull them up, David.
What?
I said I'm going to pull up the ensembles. Our good friends at Weather Nerds. One of your buddies.
Yep, Matt Onderland, who's my former coworker at the National Hurricane Center. But yeah, if you'll notice this, there's a little skew to the right that the most intense, well, maybe not anymore as we're getting closer to land, but previously the tracks that were farther to the east were the ones that were more intense. So I think we definitely have to be concerned about something like that, is that, again, with this thing slowing down and the fact that the sea surface temperatures are just so warm, the discussions this morning admitted they were going a little conservative, and they still, some of the guidance is giving this a Category 4 at landfall. It's looking like a dahlia all over again.
David, it's yet another situation where you and I were talking literally just yesterday about it's looking nasty for Tampa again, and yet again, Tampa dodges the major hurricane. There hasn't been one since 1921, so that run continues. That being all said, David, there will still be impacts felt in Tampa.
Yes, absolutely. Storm surge, that's always the big one and the big concern with Tampa. The other one is we've touched about severe weather, tornadoes, rainfall, winds. This is a very, very large storm. This morning, I sat in on the discussion from the Hurricane Center, and they were talking about how the wind field, the outer wind field right now, is 90th percentile, bigger than Katrina. And Katrina was a real monster back in 2005. Yeah, no, this is a really, really big storm. And if you look at where the tropical storm winds are in some of these models, they're stretched out like towards the Bahamas. So this is a massive, massive storm. So even though, obviously, if you follow the track, the worst of it is going to be where Idalia, where they suffered with Idalia last year. But even with Idalia last year, we received half a foot of rain at my house here in Lakeland. And that was like a persistent rain band that just parked itself over Polk County last year. So really anything can happen when it comes to a storm of this size and this intensity.
I've got the storm surge map pulled up here, David. Tampa Bay looking at roughly 5 to 8 feet of storm surge. I don't know if it's the same way for you, David, but you know, all my friends and family that know that I work in weather, of course, I'm a very popular person this time of year for everybody that lives in Florida. I'm sure you are as well. I had a phone call earlier today from somebody that lives in Tampa, saying, hey, should I not be there tomorrow? And of course, I had to ask, well, where in Tampa do you live? Can you see the water? And they're like, I live a block away from the water. Well, probably not the greatest of ideas to be there tomorrow, because as you guys can see here on the map, roughly 5 to 8 feet of storm surge. Of course, what storm surge is water being pushed above sea level. Now, of course, as David has talked about many, many times, you can see it above my head here on one of our live streams on TikTok. I think you'll have to see it behind me there. But storms or tropical cyclones, that being in the northern hemisphere, they rotate counterclockwise, right? So as this rotates, and you can see my mouse cursor, Jack, if you pull storm surge back up for us, yeah, if you see right there, it rotates counterclockwise. So as the storm heads northward toward the Big Bend, all that water that's coming up from the south to the north, imagine it like a clock. So from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock, over and over and over again, it's just getting pushed into Tampa Bay. And David, can you speak to why this little notch here, why Tampa Bay is one of the most vulnerable spots to a hurricane landfall?
Sure, because the water really has nowhere to go. Once it gets pushed into the bay, it really has nowhere to go, because there's only one exit in and out of the bay, so it's going to get pushed up onto land. The other components is that it is very flat there, and since we haven't had a major landfall since 1920, the building codes aren't really up to date for major hurricanes. You know, there's a well-known fact in Miami, for example, that after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, they had to redo all the building codes because Hurricane Andrew was a Category 5 at landfall and did a ton of damage in Homestead. Tampa hasn't had to deal with that in about 100 years. So, Mike, that's kind of what's going on. It's a perfect storm, no pun intended, of the bathymetry, as you know, the layout of the water, of the fact that it's so close to sea level, and the fact that it hasn't seen a major hurricane make landfall in 100 years.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, David, that it's coming that way. But I think the folks in Tampa have this attitude that, oh, it's not going to happen. It hasn't happened in over 100 years. That's just not how weather works, folks. Mother Nature does not care about you at all.
It only takes one.
That's right. It only takes one. And gosh, for the people that live up in the Big Bend, for Adalia to show up, or Michael to show up, of course, in Mexico City Beach in 2018. I want to bring Erica back in, if Erica's able. She has the storm surge map where she's able to really kind of zoom in on the particulars so we can get really granular with the storm surge. Whenever we're ready to pull Erica back in, I see her prepping that graphic there. So feel free to jump in, Erica, whenever you're ready. But David, Colin McCarthy, one of our digital content creators, he made a TikTok that we posted that effectively talked about how Tampa is the most vulnerable city in America to a hurricane. Do you agree with that thought process there? Of course, there are many other cities. New Orleans, of course, that is at and below sea level. Of course, very dangerous for a hurricane to come that way. But Tampa, very particularly, has a lot kind of working against it.
And I think it just definitely goes back to the fact that they haven't had to see it, because, you know, think about Galveston, for example, the 1906. So they had to rebuild.
Just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, just a couple of years ago. But they had to rebuild after all the damage was done. Miami, same kind of thing. 1992, they had to rebuild after all the damage was done. New Orleans, you know, still dealing with some effects from Katrina, but they had to rebuild. Charleston, South Carolina, after Hugo hit, things changed after that. So there are these touchstone storms for some of these bigger cities that Tampa just hasn't had to deal with. And, you know, as we said, it only takes one, Mike, right? So somehow it's amazing how, you know, Ian and Adalia and Debbie and now Helene, they're all just barely skirting to the west or just a little to the south in Ian's case from Tampa proper.
All right, let's bring Erica into the fold here. Erica, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Let's yes, we can. Let's bring up that storm surge map, because that That's a map we can see, of course, from the National Hurricane Center. I can't zoom in, you know, in the level that you have with the data set there. But I mean, look at David, look at that from Carabel. That's where Jordan Hall is. And Erica, that's the entire Big Bend there. That red color, of course, represents, as you show, greater than 9 feet. But we might even see upwards of 18 feet for some spots there, according to the National Hurricane Center.
Yeah, you know, significant storm surge. And yeah, I like this map too, because you can kind of see and go from region to region on where, you know, the specific colors are on the screen. And I saw a lot of questions, people concerned about the Tampa Bay area in terms of storm surge as well. So you're seeing this on your map. The more significant storm surge, of course, will be across Florida's Big Bend region, but I wouldn't discount the Tampa Bay area. You will see water rise over this area, and even across Southwest Florida. There's some concern about what's going to happen in Southwest Florida, you know, with Hurricane Helene. And so you're definitely going to see still storm surge here, not as significant as what you're going to see across Florida's Big Bend, but that's something that we're going to be watching very closely. And not only that, but the earlier picture that you were showing, Mike, showed that even on the eastern coast of Florida, we're talking about Jacksonville all the way down, and even across parts of the Carolinas and Georgia, you're also going to see storm surge from Hurricane Helene. So just not on Florida's west coast, it's also going to be across northeast Florida that we're going to see that storm surge as well. So something concerning, especially with what I was talking about earlier. You know, the water is just, the grounds are already so saturated across northern Florida from the past several weeks. So that is going to lead to even more flooding and even more impacts, I think, even across northeast Florida.
Folks in the TikTok chat are saying that Tampa has a casino. It's going to protect them. Listen, that's not how it works. I see David making a face here on his camera.
It's shaped like a guitar, right? That's got to count for something.
Listen, folks, the way that it works, even though the storm is not forecast to make a direct landfall, with the way that it's going to pass by, with Tampa being on the eastern side, if you divide a storm like this into 4 quadrants, we have the left side and the right side, okay? Or the left and the right. As it rotates counterclockwise, so from south to north effectively, on the right side is where you often find the tornado threat, where you often find the strongest winds near the eye wall, where you find the heaviest downpours of rain. So that right side is often called the dirty side of the storm. If you had to be anywhere in a hurricane, you more often want to be on the western, on the left side of the storm, being that the real nasty stuff is there on the eastern side. If you look at Helene's path here, it is forecast to go west of Tampa, meaning that all of what I just described, Tampa is still under the threat of dealing with those conditions. Tampa's under, let me pull it up here. I'm going to go into the layers menu and turn on the weather alerts. And we're going to turn on the, hurricane and tropical. Tampa, as you can see, is under a hurricane watch and is under a tropical storm warning as it stands right now. So winds are going to be above 39 miles per hour almost the entire day tomorrow. And as David just mentioned, Tampa, the bay, when the water comes in, as it will, this is not like Ian, folks, where Ian went south of Tampa, or even Idalia, that was a little different in terms of where it went. This storm is 400 miles wide. This is a considerably larger storm. David, can you speak to, again, for folks that are just joining us, that I think that was a really great point, that you were listening to the call you said from the National Hurricane Center. Can you speak to the rarity of the size of this storm? I mean, it's a big one.
Yes. According to the outer wind radii, I believe they use 5 knots. This is the 90th percentile in terms of size. So we're talking, way up there with Katrina. Idalia wasn't that big. This thing is an absolute monster, owing to its specific formation in that Central American gyre a few days ago. So yeah, this is a not a common event.
David, we often talk, and lately the trend has not been our friend in this sense. Of course, last year with El Nino, all those long track storms that were coming from Africa were just getting chopped to pieces or would go northward. And you brought something up that was very apt. That was during Idalia, of course, last year, where you mentioned those storms that are going to blow up near us that don't have a long way to travel or get caught into the Gulf. Those are going to be the ones that inevitably go like thermonuclear. We're looking at that again here, where this storm, as you guys can see in the path, it hasn't really traveled that very far. It started right here, south of Cuba, east of Mexico, and kind of just to the south of the Cayman Islands. Just in about a day or so, here we are looking at a storm, as David touched on, that's 400 miles wide in terms of its wind field. Of course, the worst of the winds will be right there in the center of the eye, but extending away from it are additional hazards as well. If you guys in the chat of TikTok, and we've got folks here on YouTube, on X, I've got the chats pulled up in front of me here. We're going to go for another 15 minutes or so. So get your questions in now. We will try our best to answer as many as we can. Someone here on TikTok said, nothing like a good old Mike Linden live stream. Listen, man, it goes well beyond me. We've got the whole team. Big shout out to Jack, if he can pull up his camera. This new streaming setup, everything here in this studio, this fancy new setup, Jack did all of that. So big shout out to Jack. We need some W's in the chat for Jack. And of course, he's got his camera. I'm waiting to see him pull up. Wait till you see his setup. It is awesome. So big shout out to Jack. We're going to be coming at you live tomorrow, the entire day for the most part, with everybody you see here. Meteorologist Erica Lopez, myself, Dr. David Ruglicki. We're going to have meteorologist Matthew Capucci and Jordan Hall out in the field, and we're also going to be joined by some of our digital content creators who you might have seen on TikTok and across some of our other vertical video platforms, that being Will Cano and Colin McCarthy, who you may know on social media as US Stormwatch. He has a pretty viral social media account, and Colin's been doing some great work, and so has Will, of course, over the course of the summer. Can we pull up Jack's camera? Can we see Jack? There he is. You can see him in the corner. He's waving at you. Big shout out to Jack. He's pulling the strings. I mean, his setup is awesome. David, I don't know if you've been in the office to see it here lately. We got to get you in here to shoot something, but gotta love it. Anyway, if you guys have any questions for us in the chat, we will try to answer them. Again, I remind you that we are streaming across all of our social media platforms and, of course, in the MyRadar app as well. That is what I am using right here. You guys can see it behind me in the studio. You can see it up on your screen right here, that being the Windows app. And then you folks on TikTok can't see this. Here, I'll hold it up for you so you guys can see it. Right there on the iPad, that is also the MyRadar app. Jack, if you want to pull up the shot that you just had with all of, there it is. So the MyRadar app, all around me, is completely free to download. It's the label that pays me. You can see it on my shirt right here. It is completely free to download. You can search for it on any major mobile app platform, iOS, Android, Windows, and on Amazon as well. It's coming soon to Apple TV. Very exciting. David, I know you're a Linux user. You know, I don't know if we're going to have a native Linux app, but maybe, and I mean this with all due respect, folks, maybe the nerds in the chat will want it, and maybe we'll make it happen. Big shout out to our CEO, Andy. He's a big nerd too, but we're all a bunch of nerds, I guess, that work in weather and love this kind of stuff. That being said, you can download the MyRadar app totally for free. Of course, there are premium features within the app where you can unlock those premium features if you want to take your meteorological game to the next level, but the app, again, is completely free. We're going to be streaming live tomorrow as the storm is on final approach for landfall. We're trying to figure out what time that's going to be, likely around 2 o'clock Eastern time, and then we'll be with you through landfall, which, David, that is looking likely to occur around what time tomorrow evening?
I believe they've pushed it back. It's slowed down,
considerably,
right?
right? Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking, 8, 9 o'clock? Because before, I believe yesterday it was 7 p.m. and now it's slowed down 8 to 9. Yeah, I gotta say, I'm seeing it too. Some of these TikTok comments are absolutely wild.
David, someone on YouTube says Linux nerds for the win. I knew there was going to be someone out there that was going to be on Team Linux.
I need
awesome.
to. I need to like not shave my my neck for a couple days next time we do one of these.
Erica, can you pull up the? If you can still hear me, Erica, if you can pull up the model run so we can show folks what it's going to look like here. On its final approach here, we'll wait. I think Erica's got it up here, the future cast.
Yeah, so some of them actually did update, so now it's looking a little better, a little bit more in line with what the path had, because there's one that we were talking about that looked a little wonky, but finally, I think that it made a full run. So maybe we could show that one first.
Yeah, I think we got it up on screen. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna play through it.
Oof.
Yeah, I think earlier is a little bit more south. So,
which model is this, Erica?
So this is the graph model that we were talking about earlier. It did get a little bit fixed, but yeah, and then we could show the HER too. I see a lot of people asking if it's going to be a little bit more of a, I think, eastern turn. But let's show this one.
Yeah, so it looks like the HER's kind of picking up on that as well.
Yeah.
Folks, looking at all these different models, it's kind of like if you're doing a science experiment or if you're putting together a science report. If you just looked up one scholarly article online and was like, that's what I'm going with, that's it, you're doing yourself a disservice. I mean, David was a research meteorologist. I can't imagine, David, you read one book, for example, and said, yep, that's what's going down. You got to look at all of the options that are available to you and make an educated thesis from that. David, can you see the models that Erica's pulling up here?
Yes,
you
I can
see them on screen. These are a little more Eastern. That's the HRRR and the IBM graph model that are taking this pretty far east from the path as it stands right now. Any thoughts?
It depends on what's going on with the trough and the ridge. And I know we've talked about this, in previous landfalls and previous videos, is that when you're talking about steering, you want to look at the 500 millibars. What's the trough doing? What's the ridge doing? So any subtle weakness, for example, the ridge is the one we need to be concerned about primarily, the one that's off the east coast of Florida. Easy for me to say. But we want to look at that one and see if that is slowly nudging itself to the east. So maybe the HER is moving it slightly to the east. The internal dynamics aren't going to matter as much here. I mean, they're all seeing major hurricanes, but it's what happens to that ridge. Like maybe graph is pulling that a little to the east. Maybe the HER is pulling that a little to the east. One thing that might be interesting to look at is the AI models. So the ECAIFS that's built off GraphCast. They actually do a really good job with what we call big wave numbers, like huge synoptic flows, like the troughs, the highs, and the lows. And that's one of the ones I would potentially be paying attention to in this case, Mike.
Sorry about that. My dad just texted me. He's one of them too, David. You know, one of those fair weather. I love my dad, of course, but he works at Cape Canaveral, so now he's been bugging me about the storm here. Again, folks, that's on the east coast of the state, and from Erica's run, you can see right there, 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That looks like a pretty potent feeder band to the south of Orlando right there, and extending as far south and east as West Palm Beach. I mean, that tornado threat, we have not gotten a tornado watch just yet. I've got to imagine that that's coming into tomorrow. And then, holy cow, look at that band, Erica, up near Charleston, South Carolina there. I mean, shoot, Atlanta is going to be dealing with a lot of mess tomorrow. Can we bring that model back to the beginning and play it out for the folks? Yeah, let's let this thing play out here.
Yeah, Atlanta's pretty interesting. I was there in 2020 when there was a very active hurricane season, and they got a lot of rain, a lot of wind. I remember a lot of trees being down, power outages. So, Atlanta, although it's really rare that they see impacts from hurricanes, that's definitely going to be one of those cities that we're going to be watching. Not just tomorrow, but I think even into Friday. I think Friday will be the big day for Atlanta and areas inland. But I'm playing it through. I'm really slow.
David, another comment, by the way, on YouTube. Linux is not terrible, just not for the faint of heart. That really struck a chord when I started talking about Linux here in the live stream. Sandy Rose
I liken
is back.
it to I like it to Eagles fans and heavy metal fans. We are vocal and very committed to our systems.
Ugh,
go Birds!
Yuck! I just heard Jack in my ear there. All right. I just realized that the word Tallahassee is being filtered out by the AI moderation that we have in the chat. That's very funny. So I fixed that here on YouTube. We got Lisa on Facebook that's asking about Panama City. So let's do that. So David, Erica, we can all answer this here. Jack, if we want to take the main MyRadar app, I've got it pulled up right here. So Panama City Beach is right here. You guys should be able to see my mouse cursor. It's right here, right? I'm circling it. So it's not in the cone, right? And David, it's on the western side of the cone. So for Lisa there in Panama City Beach, what can she expect tomorrow evening as the storm begins to make landfall somewhere likely east of her?
I mean, it's going to be, I wouldn't go outside tomorrow. I wouldn't go driving around. But since they're going to be on the western side, they're going to have actually not as bad impacts as what's going to happen on the east side, you know, where Cedar Key and that kind of thing. So as you were talking before about storm surge, right? The front right side, that's the dirty side. I guess the other side would be the clean side if we're gonna run with this metaphor. So I think they'll be okay. They're gonna deal with rain. You cannot discount any of the tornado threats, but because they're gonna be on the rotating winds that are going against the motion of the storm, the impacts are going to be reduced.
We've got a comment here on YouTube asking about the SPC. Let's pull up the SPC. Jack, I've got it on my web browser here. So the SPC day one, that of course is today. You can see the marginal threat that extends, I mean, so far northward all the way into western West Virginia there. But here's what the SPC outlook looks for tomorrow. I don't think I can zoom in. I'll try my best here. Ooh, that looks messy. I can move over. That should help. Oh, I lost it. Where did it go? Categorical. All right. That should work. TikTok, all y'all should be able to see this, right? Let me know if you guys can see this here. I zoomed in as much as I can. You should see it there. So, of course, the yellow color there is a slight risk. That's a 2 out of 5 on the SPC center scale. And Erica, that probably would be some good stuff to have for tomorrow as well, the SPC outlooks. Even though, anyway. So then we have the enhanced risk. That's that orange color. That's a 3 out of 5 on the SPC scale, right? You can see that there's roughly 1 million people at risk for the enhanced risk tomorrow. That's Savannah, Georgia, Hilton Head Island, Hinesville, Georgia, Statesboro, Georgia, Brunswick, Georgia, and then roughly 11.5 million under the slight risk. That extends from Central Florida all the way into South Carolina. What the SPC is really keying in on here is the development of severe thunderstorms and tornado-warned storms. David, can we speak to, again, what the tornado threat will look like tomorrow as this storm makes landfall? Remember, folks, you can see it above my head here on the iPad. And again, Jack, if you can pull up momentarily the main MyRadar app here, if I can find my mouse cursor, there it is. The storm is expected to make landfall here and then work its way westward and hooking up north here into parts of Tennessee and Kentucky. So I'm sure you're wondering, well, what the heck's going on with the tornado threat to the east of that? Jack, again, if you want to pull up the web browser here. So again, there's the tornado risk. It is way east of where the storm is expected to make landfall. David, can you break down again why it is that we're likely to see the big tornado threat tomorrow, particularly here for this orange color?
Sure. Tornadoes like a couple of things. They like low-level vertical wind shear in a very specific kind of way. They like thermodynamic instability, and they like flat land. So this is over an area of Georgia that is by the sea, is generally very flat. It's on the front right side, so you are going to get the constructive interference, you know, as the forward motion of the storm and the cyclonic circulation come together. You're going to get enhanced wind speeds on that side. Additionally, the storm is probably going to be sheared, which means it's going to be tilted, which messes with its thermodynamic structure. And we know from previous studies that when the storm is sheared and tilted, that messes with the thermodynamic instability, down tilt, and that also favors tornado genesis. So I think it's a combination of all of these things together with the front right side, the fact that it's going to be sheared and tilted, some low-level instabilities, all of that coming together is what's probably leading to the SPC to give you the orange right there. The that is not the moderate,
the enhanced risk.
Enhanced. There we go. Sorry, the enhanced risk. I couldn't read it from there. Thank you.
No worries. All right, so it is about to be 5 o'clock Eastern time. So we're going to wrap things up here momentarily. We can go for just a little bit longer. Folks, I want to remind you that if you are watching on TikTok, Jack, if you want to, again, pull the app up here, I'll focus it out again. God, my mouse cursor keeps getting lost. Where is it? There it is. All right. So we're going to bring it to the top. I'll give you a full kind of rundown of everything we're looking at, and then we will answer your questions. I've got TikTok chat right here. I've got the YouTube, Facebook, X chat over here. We will answer your questions before we round things out. Of course, Jack, if you want to pull up the team coverage shot again, I'm joined, of course, by meteorologist Erica Lopez and tropical weather expert and director of meteorological research, Dr. David Ruglicki. Again, he's the Eagles fan in the chat. Whatever. We don't like talking about it. We got people here on TikTok that keep saying, go Eagles. We got Jack. I hear Jack in my ear talking about the Eagles, too. I'm a New York Giants fan, so, you know, not a big Eagles fan.
I will say I'm a Jags fan. I've been to one of their games. And of course,
you're from Texas, too. So, you know,
I know. I can't say that. You know, my family's, they're Cowboys. They're all Cowboys, but... yeah, I'm a little torn. Yeah.
Oh no, we got it. Oh man, the TikTok chat. I got boo Giants. I got boo Giants in here. Yay, go Jags. Oh, fun times. Oh man. All right, so let's bring it from the top here, Jack, before we bring things home here. So Hurricane Helene is what we are tracking. It is right now. David and Erica, it is entering the Gulf of Mexico as we speak. It is now ticking up to 86 mile per hour winds. Not long ago here, that was at 80. Of course, we now have, it's 5 o'clock, so this is the next big update from the National Hurricane Center, right? So 86 mile per hour winds with gusts at 104. It's now up to 12 miles per hour in terms of its ground speed. It's expected to get up to 25 miles per hour. So this is a big honkin' storm, up in the 10% of historic storms in terms of size. That is really getting some forward momentum here. So it's a Category 1 as it stands right now, but it is forecast to become a Category 2 later tonight, if not overnight and into tomorrow, as it enters the incredibly warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. And David and Erica, I am seeing something here on the path that is new from 5 o'clock that really jumps out at me, and it's this number 4. The National Hurricane Center calling for a Category 4 hurricane tomorrow morning, intensifying over the Gulf of Mexico. Well, I just got chills. Oof. So that's a big one, folks. Of course, this was forecast to be a major hurricane. That's Category 3 and above. They are now ticking the intensity up to Category 4. That is going to change a lot in terms of what the impacts will look like at landfall. I'm going to look at the storm surge graphics here momentarily, but I'm going to keep going with the path. They've narrowed it down just a little bit more here. So you can see that the path extends from just to the east of Panama City Beach into Apalachicola, Carabel, Crawfordville. Perry, Florida, now no longer in the cone, but Tallahassee remains. And Tallahassee now on the eastern side of the cone. So that is also a rather interesting development as well. Zooming out here, it is expected to continue its way northward, remaining Category 1 intensity, guys, on its way to the Alabama-Georgia border. That's wild there. It continues to go northward as a weakening hurricane into Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, as a weakening Category 1 hurricane before weakening to a tropical storm over Nashville. Guys, David and Erica, look at the cone here now. I mean, this is a hard left turn as it fully weakens to a tropical depression here over parts of western Kentucky, over Paducah, Kentucky. Effectively, it looks to finally meet its end there. But the big news here from the 5 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center is rapid intensification, going from a Cat 1, where it is now, to a Category 4. We're going to look at the storm surge threat here momentarily,
yeah, so
and then I want to bring...
storm surge numbers also went up too. I'm seeing 15 to 20 now. So that's one of the bigger updates as well from the National Hurricane Center.
Jack, can you pull up the web browser I've got right here? 15 to 20 feet. Erica's right. Folks, this was 5 to 10 yesterday, right? So things are getting going fast here. I want to bring, and then Tampa Bay remains 5 to 8. Charlotte Harbor, and to Erica, your point earlier about Southwest Florida, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge there remains. And again, the storm isn't going anywhere close to there, just speaks to the sheer size. 8 to 12 feet to the north of Tampa, and then for the Suwannee River, the Big Bend through to Apalachicola, anywhere from 10 to near 20 feet of storm surge. Folks, you got to understand what that means. It's water being pushed above sea level, right? I'm 6'3", so for the most part, anywhere from Tampa all the way to Apalachicola, if I were to stand outside, I'm completely inundated by water, completely covered by it. That is a big uptick there, David. I want to bring
Mike,
you in.
you shared earlier an image from the National Weather Service that kind of painted like a building with, I think, the different types of feet of storm surge. I thought that was a great graphic by the National Weather Service. I don't know if maybe
I'm gonna find that here. I've got it up on the X profile, which if you guys are not following us on X, again, still so silly, I have to say that, but follow us on X. You had such a great name in Twitter. Anyway, I'm looking right here at the graphic that Erica's talking about, right? So here's like your family of 4 down here. I mean, just look at how, again, this building, right, is 12 feet plus. That water tomorrow for the Big Bend is going to be above the roofs of these houses that are there. Big numbers. David, I want to bring you in here for your rapid reaction here. Category 4 hurricane expected in the Gulf of Mexico tomorrow. Again, in the top 10% in terms of size, a 400-mile wide wind field. I'm sure people are thinking that we are hyping this thing up. I mean, it is defying a lot of expectations, right, from initial model runs, and maybe even confirming some of our worst fears looking at some of those model runs a couple of days ago. David, your thoughts? Category 4 by tomorrow morning.
I think this is absolutely going to happen. And am I mistaken, or has this track shifted a little to the west? Did they shift it a little
like it.
It seems like it, right? Because just a little bit to the west. I know the
Tallahassee
models
was more central, but now no longer.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I first saw the new track too. I'm like, did it shift a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we've been. I'd like to take back that Panama City question. You might have a much worse day than what I was telling you maybe 5-10 minutes ago.
They're still not in the cone, mind you, Panama City.
Yes. So it's getting ever closer. So I think if you read the discussions this morning from the Hurricane Center, they admitted that they said that they were probably going conservative. And I think they were just waiting to see. The big question was this going to hit the Yucatan? And now with this, where it is right now, it didn't go over land. It didn't suffer some momentary or brief weakening to maybe keep it under control. And it's going to move slower than what they thought. So you're going to be looking at a storm that didn't have to deal with the effects of the Yucatan in a way, and is going to spend more time over water. Category 4 makes a lot of sense.
I'm going to pull up the discussion here momentarily from the National Hurricane Center, but Jack, if you want to take it back on me here. Again, folks, we're going to keep it going for a little bit longer, and then we've got to wrap things up. If you're watching on TikTok, we would really appreciate it. You can see on the screen there, we're almost at 75,000 followers. There's almost 1,000 of you in here right now. It's completely free to follow us. And if you're digging the content, there's certainly more to come. Follow us so that way you always know whenever we drop a new TikTok, or of course whenever we go live. And hey, tap on that screen. We got 17,000 likes, guys, so far in this TikTok. 18, as I just said that. Tap on the screen. Let us know you're digging the live stream. And hey, we really appreciate all of your support. I've got to thank all of the folks that are giving us gifts here. If I can find my mouse cursor, that's been like the story of the evening. Talk a Lot TV. I know that game. Thank you very much for the gifts. For Taylor Made, the king of TikTok, sent us the lightning bolts. Well, we just got a little origami, little crane there from Ham, Brittany, May. I'm seeing some usual suspects in here too, some people that give us gifts. Thank you very much for joining us again, guys. We really appreciate it. The finger heart, right? Shout out to BTS. Thank you very much, Brittany. Appreciate it very much. All of the gifts, all of your support, we greatly appreciate it. Almost to 75,000 followers. That's so cool. And again, if you're watching us across our other social media platforms, we are also live on X, YouTube, Facebook, and of course live in the MyRadar app as well. Jack, before we get to that discussion, if you could pull the app up again one more time for the good people. It is completely free to download. You can see it on my shirt, MyRadar, right here on the screen. Everywhere you can see the icon. That is what you should search for. Look for MyRadar. It is completely free to download. We will let you know when it's going to rain, when wildfires are coming next year, when hurricanes are nearby. We have got you covered. There's so much great stuff that you can do in the app, whether it is tracking hurricanes, tracking objects in space, or if you even want to check out Mars, you can do so in the MyRadar app as well. There's so many little Easter eggs to find. Okay, let's go back and look at the discussion here before we round things out. And then, guys, we will answer some of your questions. I'm seeing a lot of them. Someone in the TikTok chat says, app is goated. I use it for driving. I hope not while you're driving, unless, of course, you're talking about the Routecast feature, which, of course, MyRadar, one of the first, if not the first weather app to get approval to be in Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. We will give you turn-by-turn directions and route you around bad weather. Very, very cool stuff. David and Erica, I want to read through the discussion, being that we've got David here. For those of you that are watching in the chat, Dr. David Ruglicki, if we can pull him up on camera here, Jack, or at least pop him up in the little corner. He used to work at the National Hurricane Center. I mean, he is one of the most brilliant minds in tropical meteorology, and he happens to work with us. Dr. Hurricane, let's read this together here. Can you folks on TikTok see this? I might have to zoom in a little bit more here. Hang on. All right, David, I want to get into your head with what the National Hurricane Center is thinking behind this discussion here. So a ragged eye is becoming apparent in visible satellite imagery and has been observed in recent radar data. Based on the improved structure, the initial intensity is set at 75 knots, which is at the high end of satellite intensity. This is supported by an Air Force reconnaissance mission. After landfall, the system is forecast to interact with a deep layer trough to the west and turn northwestward with a decrease in speed over the Tennessee Valley. The environment appears primed for significant strengthening while Helene moves across the Gulf of Mexico. The forecast track more or less runs along the axis of the loop current during the next 24 hours, where ocean temperatures are about 30 Celsius. In addition, Helene will be moving through an environment of low vertical shear and strong upper level divergence. This is what we've been talking about for about the past hour and a half here. Some of the rapid intensification indices, particularly DTOPS, David, for the good folks at home, what is DTOPS?
DTOPS is a hybrid statistical dynamical model that takes into account both statistical forecasts and things like HWRF, does a little bias correction, and uses that to figure out the rapid intensification probabilities.
Okay, so DTOPS responds to this environment by indicating at least a 90% chance of a 35-knot increase in intensity over the next 24 hours. Reading between the lines, rapid intensification is happening. The NHC intensity forecast now shows an intensity of 115 knots. That's category 4 at 24 hours, which is mirrored by several of the regional hurricane models and the ship's guidance. All right, so that confirms what we thought, that they're going to buy into what the models are putting out here. It should be noted that additional strengthening is possible beyond 24 hours before Helene makes landfall Thursday evening. How about this, folks? Helene is forecast to be a large, major hurricane when it reaches the Big Bend. As a result, storm surge, wind, and rainfall impacts will extend well away from the center and outside the forecast cone, particularly on the east side. All you folks in the chat that keep asking about Tampa, Orlando, Ocala, Gainesville, this is for you right here. In addition, the fast-forward speed when Helene moves inland will result in a far inland penetration of strong winds over parts of the southeastern United States. A higher-than-normal gust factor has been indicated in the official forecast while Helene is inland. David, I want to bring you back to one thing in here that really jumps out at me, and it's this sentence right here. It should be noted that additional strengthening is possible beyond 24 hours before Helene makes landfall Thursday evening. David, does that mean that we could be making a run at a Cat 5 here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is lessons learned from Idalia and Michael, which kept going and going and going and going right up until landfall. And, you know, I know, but we've brought it up before, but there was a study done by the Hurricane Center in 2010 that talked about why do hurricanes weaken almost very consistently before they make landfall into the Gulf Coast. That behavior has shifted in the past 15 years. And as I brought up that climatology image a little while ago, that showed that, you know, you had a cluster of major hurricane landfalls in like the 1800s, and then all of a sudden you have Michael a few years ago, Idalia last year, and now you're looking at another one right here. So things have decidedly changed for the Gulf Coast And I believe that what they're doing here is that they're admitting that, that things have changed. And based on recent history, Mike, that we could be looking for intensification right up until landfall.
I'm going to pull up the rainfall potential here. We have not looked at that. Yeah, so they've upped the totals here. I got to zoom out. This is so zoomed in. It's like hurting my brain. All right, folks on social media, y'all should still be able to see this. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit more. So the red color there where landfall is expected, folks, that red color is 12 to 16 inches of rain on top of the 15 to 20 feet of storm surge that's coming. So a lot of water. Look at the flash flooding threat. Okay, so this is new. Here at landfall, a high risk of flash flooding. That's the purple color here. And then we've got one here, this bean shaped here for North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Wow, Atlanta really close to being in that high risk of flash flooding. That is a new development. Folks, things are ticking up in intensity here. Business is picking up here. All right, so we're going to answer a couple of your questions in the chat now. Jack, we want to pull up the app here. If there's a way that we can bring Erica up in a little picture-in-picture there too, that would be awesome. All right. Let's see. I think you guys should also be able to see parts of the chat too. Richard on YouTube says TikTok is saying category 6 by Thursday. Good old TikTok. Good old TikTok, huh? Let's see what else we've got here. We've got Marie asking about Atlanta. Erica and David, let's talk about Atlanta because we haven't touched on this here. I'm going to zoom in. Atlanta expected to see a weakening category 1 hurricane. I mean, that's pretty wild. David, that jumps out at me in the sense where over land, you're cutting off the storm's lifeblood there. What do you think is going into the reasoning that the National Hurricane Center is keeping the category 1 intensity that far inland?
Because it's moving so fast. Like, this is absolutely, well, first of all, it's going to be potentially category 4 plus at landfall, so it's gonna have a lot of oomph with it anyway. But simply because it is moving so fast and it's so large, it's probably going to be able to hold itself together just a little bit better as it moves farther inland. And remember, this is flat. You know what? It's a lot of forest and some swamps. There's no mountains.
It's raining right now too. I mean, there's a predecessor rain event happening right now. We're looking at it. Atlanta is dealing with very heavy rain as we speak. There's more coming. So the flooding potential, very, very real there. Man, that really jumps out at me there. That's a biggie. But now, of course, that number 4, that sticks out like a sore thumb. Jack, I'm going to pull up from David's best buddy here, Dr. Levi Cowan on Tropical Tidbits here. We're going to look at the intensity guidance. David, you laugh. You're like one of the most well-connected guys in tropical meteorology. You know everybody. So what are your thoughts here? Again, I know these are just models, folks. This isn't a forecast. Jack, we might have to hide Erica just for a moment so we can see the bottom of the screen there. I can't minimize it. David, you still have a couple models that are coming in well under the high end. Of course, the National Hurricane Center is calling for that Cat 4. What's going on here?
A lot of it has to probably do with initialization. Is that this storm? So these are the 18Z runs. So it really depends on how the models are handling those initial conditions. Because the storm is big and maybe it's drifting a little west, or maybe the trough moves just a little bit. I think that's kind of what these models are dealing with here, is that their initializations can't entirely handle what's going on here with Helene.
All right, people are asking about landfall again. I'm going to pull up the map here again on MyRadar here. Again, you can download MyRadar for free, and you can look at this for yourself as well. The Hurricane Tracker, a premium feature in the app as well, but you get so much other stuff. It eliminates the ads. You get no ads in videos. You get per station radar. You get routecast. You get so much, but of course, the bulk of the app is completely free to use. Landfall looks likely to occur somewhere here, folks. West of where Idalia made landfall and east of where Michael made landfall. So it looks like it's somewhere here from south of Tallahassee near Carabel, Apalachicola, and getting close to Panama City Beach. Not quite, but Mexico Beach, of course, that is where Michael made landfall, is in the cone. And the cone has shifted ever so slightly westward. Okay? So that answers your question there. Shout out to Nathan on YouTube that says that he has premium and loves the app. Big shout out. Florida Investor says Orlando out of danger. No. Orlando not in the cone, whereas during Ian, we were in the cone. I'm coming at you live from Orlando, folks. David's in Lakeland, right? But this storm is huge. I mean, look at the size of the storm as it is right now, and it's not even fully really there yet, right? We got a ways to go, folks. When all said and done, the wind field will be likely 400 miles wide. So in fact, if I go into the app here and I tap on the layers menu and go into hurricanes, we're going to go to wind speed forecast. And this is going to show you how wide and far away from the center of the eye the tropical storm force winds will be. So that yellow color, which is Orlando, Daytona Beach, Jacksonville, up near Erica, that's a 30 to 40% likelihood of the tropical storm force winds. That's 39 miles per hour and above. Central Florida's under a tropical storm warning right now, folks. I mean, the winds are going, they're coming, right? And if you look as far west as they're going too, into Biloxi, Mississippi, maybe even into New Orleans, they might feel tropical storm force winds. As for the timing, tomorrow 8 a.m., to about Tuesday, or to about Tuesday. Gosh, can you imagine? Sorry. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. to tomorrow around 2 p.m. is the greatest window of time for Tampa and Orlando to get the real gut punch of the winds. At that point, the storm continues to work its way inland, but that wind threat extends well away from the center of the eye. The eye is just where you find the strongest winds around that eye, but the threats extend well far away from the center. Folks, if you got questions for our team, get it into the chat right now because we are about gearing up to round things out here. Someone on TikTok just said, oh gosh, the comments are flying through. We're going to be able to monitor these a little better tomorrow. Spider-Man, shout out to Spider-Man, says Cat 4 they're saying now. Yes, it's not a Category 4 yet, but it is now officially forecast to become a Category 4 early tomorrow morning. Golly. Sheesh. All right, what else we got here? We've got folks on YouTube asking about Dothan, Alabama. So Alabama on the western side, right, of the storm, but there are parts of Alabama, that being Dothan, that are in the path there, that weren't earlier, but now are. I would say download the app, make sure that you are keeping an eye on things as they develop, because even though you're not at the coast there, you are on the western side of the storm, so it is better there than on the east, but you're running out of time to get prepared. I'm not trying to instill panic. Preparing is key here, right? If you fail to prepare, then prepare to fail. Non-perishable foods, water to last you at least 3 days if you were to lose power, right? Medications, if you have pets, make sure that the pets have food in like a little Ziploc bag. David and I both have, I now have a 7-year-old child, David. That is so nuts. And your son, around the same age, of course. If we're to lose power and the iPads aren't charged up, a good old coloring book is going to be parents' best friend here. Toss that in the hurricane kit as well. And of course, a feature in the MyRadar app, Jack, if we want to pull that up here into the layers menu. Again, the layers look like the stack of cards there. This is kind of your launch pad to do all the cool things in the app. We've got this power outages layer that you can toggle on. Erica, David, I imagine this is going to be all sorts of nuts tomorrow in terms of the power outages that we're going to see just based on the wind. But we've already got a power outage right here in Wakulla County. Roughly 3.5% of total customers there, roughly 639, are without power. And there is a Category 4 hurricane lurking south of them. Anyway, what else we got here? A couple more questions and then we'll round things out. I know I keep saying that here, but I have got to get going. And then David and Erica, we all have to get prepared for this very long day tomorrow. Let's see here. Alina, what is the app? It's on my shirt, MyRadar, right here. You can download it for free. I see you on, you guys on TikTok can see me. Boom, right there, MyRadar. Eric on YouTube says he's prepped as much as he can be. Big shout out to you. Richard saying, not trying to spam, just want to know what you believe will happen in Palm Bay. So again, Palm Bay and Palm Coast right there on the eastern side. Show you Palm Bay, Florida. Oh, lost my mouse cursor again. Yeah, you are near Melbourne, my man. Windy and wet tomorrow. Early tomorrow for you, more than likely. Is Kentucky fine? Yes, for now. Can you get the app on a MacBook? Not yet. Unfortunately, not yet. It is definitely something that we would like to have. Hey, shout out to DJ Pop Rocks on Twitch. Orlando fam, shout out to Orlando. Gotta love that. I answered your question about Palm Bay. Let's round this out. Erica, David, if we can, Jack, we can bring them on screen here. I could stay here all night answering questions, but we've got to get prepped for this stream into tomorrow. Is there anything that you guys want to add as we get ready to close this out here? Anything that jumps out at you from the development that we just saw from the National Hurricane Center? I would imagine overnight things are about to get nuts from this.
I think it's crazy that we're kind of sitting here. Hurricane Helene is a Category 1. And then by the time we wake up tomorrow, a completely different story. So I think crazy rapid intensification with the storm. I don't know when the last time it's been that I've seen a track that we're sitting here that it's a Category 1 and then all of a sudden the forecast calls for a Category 4. I don't know if you can remember anything, Dr. David, on when the last time we've seen something like this.
I don't even think Ian did this, right? And I know for certain it wasn't Adalia. Adalia just kept going and going and going and going. I feel like in late 2021, there was a monster at when I was at the Hurricane Center, and I distinctly remember Dan Brown, who was on staff at the time, and he like went outside the guidance and he's like, there's nothing standing in its way. And I think that's kind of what's going on here. There really is nothing standing in its way because the shear is low. The forward velocity is going to be great. It'll slow down a little bit. And the sea surface temperatures are just going to be really, really warm. Yeah, there's Ian's
path, David. So, of course, Ian began well out here just north of South America, right? But Ian was a little slow to go there, but business picked up here, right? As a Cat 1, became a Cat 3 as it went over top of Cuba, right? We were live for that. And then it picked up right here to a Cat 4. Of course, boy, it was close to being a Cat 5. I mean, on the borderline there. But for folks in Fort Myers, rest assured, it does not seem like this storm will be coming to you in the same way how Ian is. But yeah, this is a wild storm already. And to Erica's point, waking up tomorrow morning to seeing a Cat 4, and when we're looking at it right now as a Cat 1, is a pretty crazy thought here. All right. So, David, anything else that you would like to add here before we round things out? I don't want to hear about the football team.
Well, now that you said something, go Birds. But second of all, we just said Jack in the ears, go Birds. Second of all is, I think Erica made a really, really good point, is that we're probably going to see something radically different tomorrow morning. And it's going to be, hold on to your butts tomorrow. And the Hurricane Center made this point. I think we understand now that they're different now when things get into the Gulf. Things are just different from what we've normally expected over the past 20, 30, 40 years.
Jack, one more time, if you want to pull up the app here. Someone in the chat said to compare it to Michael. I want to show you guys that with the MyRadar app, again, this is a premium feature here, the historical hurricanes, where you can go back in time. David, remind me, how far back can we go with the storms? Do you know off the top of your head?
So it's in progress right now. Right now, we'll go back to about, I think, 2012 or 2014, but we're working on capabilities to go back to the 1800s.
And then, of course, historical radar also goes back to 2007, 5? Because I know we can see Katrina. Anyway,
like
point is, it goes back pretty far. But point is, you can go back and look at historical hurricanes. So here's Michael. Interestingly enough, boy, is that a similar path. Boy, is that similar. Can you see it, David?
Yep.
Boy, is that close. Holy cow, it's just a little bit to the west. Of course, it made landfall. We have here as a Cat 4. Am I making something? No, it made landfall as a Cat 5, David, correct? Barely.
Michael? Yeah, no, Michael was absolutely Cat 4. You remember the picture where it had the eye was over the, there's the air base there, where they had all the F-22s. Some of them got out and some of them got damaged.
Yeah. So, again, I know it was right here, of course, in the app, that little moment of time there showing it as a Cat 4 there. That being said, Not going to be the same storm as Michael. Of course, this storm forecast to be larger than Michael, right, David? Considerably larger.
Yep, considerably larger. Oh, it was Ida in 2021. So to answer your question, Erica, from before, that's kind of this similar situation where you go to bed like it's a tropical storm category 1, and you wake up and oh my goodness.
Here's Ida, David. Got it right here.
Yeah. Yep, that's the one.
Yep, Cat 1, boom, Cat 4 on its way to Louisiana.
So I think we're probably looking at something like that here.
All right. So, folks, that's going to round things out. If you are watching on TikTok, wow, we hit over 75,000 followers. Thank you so much for that. 29,000 likes. You guys are too kind. Appreciate it very much. I want to shout out all the folks that have sent us some gifts here recently. Apologies that we don't, have little NPC skits to acknowledge them as they come in, but we appreciate them nonetheless. Allison, Marie, the king of TikTok, Allison, Chris, Allison, my gosh, so many, Marie. Thank you again for the gifts. We really, really appreciate it very, very much. Of course, it helps us, it helps support everything that we do here at MyRadar. Again, follow us here on TikTok if you are watching on TikTok. I know that folks are watching us also on Facebook, YouTube, X, all of our various social media platforms, and of course in the app as well. I'll remind you that if you are watching us on a social media platform, all of them have the ability to download the app on our profile. For example, on TikTok, if you go to our profile, there's a little it says app with a little down arrow. Click that and you can download the app for free. And hey, if you haven't already, be sure to follow us here on TikTok. It is completely free to do so. Again, tomorrow you will see Erica, David, and the rest of our team live streaming for quite a long time. So set a reminder for yourself. Follow us now across X, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch we're streaming on right now as well. We'd really appreciate your support, and of course we will be bringing you a whole host of content tomorrow and taking you through landfall as it arrives. Again, a reminder, it is expected to make landfall, that being the storm right behind me there, that being Hurricane Helene, set to make landfall tomorrow evening in the Big Bend of Florida, potentially as a Category 4 hurricane. That is quite an uptick from what we had initially thought, but that's what the National Hurricane Center is calling for, and that's what we will be here to cover. So again, for all of us on the team, Jack, if you want to pull everybody up one more time, meteorologist Erica Lopez, meteorologist and director of meteorological research, tropical weather expert, Dr. David Ruglicki. Jack, your camera, if you want to pull yourself up one more time. We got Jack there. Jack will be joining us tomorrow, helping guide things as they come. And then, of course, big shout out to Mauricio in the back as well. Meteorologist Matthew Capucci will be in the field. Storm chaser Jordan Hall will be in the field. We also have our digital content creators, Will Cano and Colin McCarthy, joining us tomorrow as well. And most importantly, joining us is you tomorrow afternoon. So again, from all of us on the team and all of our wonderful developers that are too shy to come on camera, we love our developers that make the MyRadar app tick. Thank you very much for everything you do as well. So again, that's going to do it for the live stream for today, at least. Get some rest. A busy day out ahead of us tomorrow as Hurricane Helene, behind me there, is well on its way to the Big Bend of Florida. From all of us on the team, stay safe and stay dry. We'll catch you back here tomorrow. Peace.
Scientific standpoint, from a communication standpoint, this is a master class in meteorology. All the air is rushing in. We're basically in a vacuum right now. All the air is rushing into this area. Can't